Hello and welcome. Today I wanted to share how I add some very simple stitching and fabrics, laces, and other fibers. You see some buttons there, how I add those to my journal pages to add some texture and some interest. So I'm showing you some of the things I've pulled out that I thought might work with this page. And I created this background a little while ago, and I cut it down to size to fit in my journal. I'm going to work on that separately and then I'll glue it into my journal. I actually recorded a video on how I make a similar type of background, and I'll be sharing that in an upcoming video. So I'm going to put the journal aside and work on that page, as I said. Now I've pulled out some scraps, and these are literally fabric scraps, lace scraps. I save almost every little piece of fabric and fiber that I have, that I make, really. And I like torn edges, so I'm going to tear fabric, and I'm going to just place things and kind of audition them, as they say, to see what I think looks good. Now, this is really subjective, so whatever, what I think looks good might not look good to you, and vice versa. But just to give you an idea of how I start out, I think it's helpful to pull things out that you think work with your page and kind of go together and narrow things down, even though I usually pull out way more than I need, but that's the way I do things, and it usually works out. And so there I'm showing you the some cheesecloth that I have dyed previously. Again, it's a little scrap, so I don't even remember how I made that. It could be dyed with ink or with tea or something like that. So I'm going to spend some time kind of trying things out, going back and forth. I decided to leave this in because just to show that, I don't put together things, at the snap of a finger, and that's okay. I have to think about it and try things, a bunch of different things out. In retrospect, looking back on it, I think I could have gone, many ways that I decided not to do, and I think it all would have worked fine. But when you're in the moment, I don't know, sometimes it is hard to make decisions, but I do eventually get there. And what you see there behind the button is some threads. I even save threads that I make when I'm tearing my fabric. I pulled out some embroidery floss to add some stitches. I think that turquoise teal color will tie in nicely with the background and also stand out, which is kind of what I want. So I pulled out this fabric that had the peach color in the background, and I thought I might use that. Again, I'm going to show you, I try this, that, and the other. I sped the video up now because this does take a little bit of time. But again, when I look at this now, I think, okay, that looks good there. Why didn't I do that? I don't know, but in the end, I decided to go back to a very similar design that I started out with. So there you go. So I'm thinking that fabric would work nicely with the background, but then in the end, I decided not to use it. I don't remember now actually why I decided not to. That one looks terrible, but I think the reason I decided not to use it is because it's kind of busy, and then I cover it up with that cheesecloth, which I am determined to use, so it just didn't work for me. So I'll try not to ramble too much and just, again, say that I end up with very similar design to how I started, and I decided that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to glue things down with my glue stick for the most part to start out with, and this Uhu glue stick, I've been using it for several years, and I've never had a problem with anything falling off, coming unstuck, but you definitely should use the glue that you're that you like the best. And this is going in my journal page. So if anything does come unglued or whatever, I can just glue it back in. It's, you know, nothing critical. So later in the video, I'm also going to show you some other ideas of stitching and fabrics that I've added to our other art journal pages. Anyway, back to gluing. I'll try to, I think, jump ahead here in a minute. And I'm going to work on the fabric piece separately, and then I'm going to glue that to my background, and then I'll glue the background to my journal page. Again, I'll jump ahead here momentarily because I don't think you need to see me gluing. And I'm going to sew. I decided to use that embroidery floss to do stitching, but it's my needle that I use for those kinds of stitches is too big to fit through the buttonhole. So I happen to have this kind of turquoise teal thread. I decided to use that to sew the button on, and I'm going to tie it off at the top to add some more interest and texture, I guess. I like that look. I like the fibers kind of wonky, things kind of wonky and imperfect. I've said that before, and I really do like that style. You could accomplish the same idea doing it much neater than I do, and that's fine because everyone has their own style. So now I'm adding the stitches with the embroidery floss, and I'm just doing just basic stitches here and there just to add a little bit of interest and show you the idea. I am not an stitching expert. I'm not that great at embroidery. I know a few simple stitches, and most of the time if I try to do any, I have to go back and refresh myself on how to do them because I just don't do it that often. So I'm just showing you don't have to be an expert to do this. And I think it adds some interest to the page and some pretty color. If you want, you know, this kind of stitching is very intuitive, so you could do different stitching, you could do it closer together, farther apart, you could make X's, crosses, whatever you want to do, a design, whatever, you know, strikes your fancy, that's what you should do. But again, just the idea of how it's so easy to add something like this to your page, and I think it looks nice without being an expert embroiderer, as I said. Now the back looks messy. I'm not even tying anything off there because I'm going to glue that all down. I'm going to switch to my Dries Clear glue, so the fabric is more secure because that's kind of a heavier piece. I think the glue stick probably would have worked okay too, but that's what I decided to use. So I'll glue that all down, and then I'll glue it into my book, and just as easy as that, you have a page in your art journal. I think it turned out nice. I hope you like it. And then I'll show you some other ideas. Make sure I put a lot of glue on there so that doesn't fall off. And again, I'll just glue that into my book or my journal. So that glue dries pretty quickly too, and that's how I'll glue it on. I think it looks nice with the page on the left too, which I will do something with later on. And there it is. I added some words too to finish it off. I don't know what I'm saying there. Maybe that I could add some stitching along the edge if I wanted to. I don't know. I like to do that often. Here's another page in my journal with really simple turquoise stitching. There's some stitching with a sewing machine. Again, something I added glued on to my page. I love the way that turned out, and it's just simple one stitch with some cheesecloth and some other fibers. I sewed that on with the sewing machine because there was a tear in that old handkerchief. And there's some cheesecloth that I dyed, and I just sewed it onto with my sewing machine, which I love. There's a paint sample that I stamped onto an image onto, and then I sewed around it and glued it into my book. There's some French knots with some beautiful lace that I thought really complemented that page so nicely. And then finally, oh no, not finally, there's some, again, simple stitching in black because it ties in with the black and white photo. And then this is a journal I made a while ago with some French knots and some simple stitching on the cover. So that's my video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.